Thank you. Can you hear me well? Many years ago, I came to this country with anger in my heart. I hated America. My father was a founder of the Communist Party of Puerto Rico. He used to tell me that America was the enemy of the human race, and it was my duty as a good person to destroy this country. And I believe him. He was my dad. But eventually, I came to America. I landed at the University of Southern Mississippi, of all places. But I always say that my lungs were filled with the breath of freedom right there in Mississippi, because I discovered a new way of understanding the human person. As a Marxist, your dignity lies in being a faithful drop in a great wave, the great wave of revolution. But in America, I learned that that's a lie. It's not true. That my dignity lies in being made in the image and likeness of God, with the moral capacity of self-realization, that I have the capacity to reason, to know the truth, and volition, choice, to do the good. And there lies my dignity. And I began the Freedom and Virtue Institute because sometimes we do not understand that reality about the human person. Sometimes we treat the poor as we treat our pets. You know, we dump free stuff at people and more free stuff. And under the weight of that free stuff, sometimes lies the dignity of people waiting to be awakened. And in the Freedom and Virtue Institute, we believe that every human person that has moral capacity that comes from being made in the very image and likeness of God himself, that we can place our hands in the dirt and we can recreate our environment. And that's what we do. We believe in that capacity of the human person. In the Freedom and Virtue Institute, we believe that every person has to have an opportunity to engage in productive activity. And out of that activity comes good things that happen to people. Let me give you an example of the things we do. About 5 years ago, I went to a massive distribution of school supplies. And what I saw there was a sea of black and brown kids getting the free, cheap school supplies from a small cadre of white people. You know, in good, well-intentioned people who really care for children, care for the poor. But something dawned on me that there was something wrong here. Number one, why is always us in the receiving end? You know, I want to be in the giving end. It feels better. And it dawned on us, why don't we make them productive? And the second thing that I learned was that what they were learning was that there is benefit at the end of the long lines of dependency, and that is the normal way of meeting human needs. You stand in line and someone else meets your needs. We decided, why don't we make the kids work for it? Why don't we respect the poor enough to work with them alongside, side by side, not doing it for them, but doing it with them. Instead of passive recipients of magnanimity, they can become active participants in lives built by themselves. They become the protagonists of their own story of success, instead of remaining as scenery in the drama of our good intentions. Sometimes it's about us and how we feel when we try to help others, when in reality it should be about them. They are the protagonists, and we recede to the background of action. We become witnesses of the grandeur of lives well lived. And the Self-Reliance Clubs is now the program that came out of that experience. We are in over 20 schools in Lee County. We are in Miami. We are in different stages of starting clubs in 7 different states. And even in the Dominican Republic, we have clubs. We are growing. And what the clubs do is very simple. We go to the schools. The kids enter into all kinds of entrepreneurial initiatives. We pay them for their work. We teach them economics. And at the end of the school year, we have this wonderful field trip to a bank where we hand them their earnings at the door, and they go and open their own bank accounts, and now they can buy their own school supplies because now they have earned the right. And you know that no one is going to touch those school supplies because it costs you something. Yes, let's help the poor. But more importantly, let's help people flourish as human beings. That is what is important, to help people realize that they are the answer to their own problems. We are simply here to assist and support. If you believe in this way of helping the poor, if you believe that this is the best way to respect the full scope of human dignity, the full scope of human dignity, I ask you for your support today. You can go to our website, you can check in our brochure, you can give us a donation, you can give your volunteer work, you can go to our table at the back and learn more about our institute. We even have a generous donor that is giving us a $30,000 challenge to help open more clubs across Southwest Florida. In any way that you can help us, I ask you for your support. We don't accept government funding, by the way. We don't want it. When we started the Institute, I told my board, if people don't support us, we should disappear. That is the discipline of the market. If you don't buy our product, that's telling me you probably should be doing something else instead of just trying to go to the government, get a good grant writer and a good friend in government, and then get the money from the government and then come to you and asking you for more money. That's not what we believe. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Ismail. It's right that we applaud, but for those of us from a Christian perspective, I think the even more appropriate response is, Amen. That is the message. That is the message. These self-reliance clubs, there are 2 of them in public schools right here in Bonita Springs, and it's so thrilling to me to watch a self-reliance club flourish and see these kids just grow into their self-esteem and self-respect and their realization that their future is in their hands, not in the hands of some benefactor, and that empowers them. I will not go any further because he's already said it more eloquently than I. But we are now going to, this evening, have the opportunity to hear the life story of a remarkable man. The Bible says, where there is no vision, the people perish. But the flip side is, when there is a vision, amazing things can happen. Tonight it is my pleasure to introduce you to a man who is a visionary, who was given that vision implanted by his Creator, and he developed it through his own fertile mind and his energy and initiative. But he did not start out on the top rung of life. Actually, on the very bottom rung, the same rung where Ismail's ministry is reaching and empowering young people. Here's a story of a man who began at the bottom and has, by his vision, birthed a pizza chain, a World Series champion, a new law school with Christ-centered values to pump Christian lawyers into a fairly corrupt legal system, and then a Christian university, and then a Christian town surrounding that university, right here in Collier County, and then a network, which he currently chairs, called Legatus, of committed Catholic Christian CEOs of the top organizations in America who get together to inspire and hold one another accountable to the principles of our Lord upon which they have committed their lives. And on. His vision is inspiring. And I believe it is the vision that has brought us here to hear the story. Would you please join me as we welcome Mr. Tom Monaghan.
Thank you. Thank you. Hope I brought my notes. Yeah, wow, there they are. They're buried. You like my lining? On St. Patrick's Day, I wear it inside out. I'm here primarily because Ishmael sent me his book a few years ago, and I couldn't put it down. It's a subject I've always been interested in, the plight of the blacks and how government's going about it. It's entirely the wrong way, I think, enslaving them. And I called him up and had dinner with him and his wonderful wife, and it caused me to read more and more on the subject by other authors, Tom Sowell, Sheldon Steele, Larry Oney, and some others. So I recommend that book to you. I don't know the name of it, but you can get it on Amazon, and you'd be. Well, I won't go into it because that's what we got to talk about. My life, not his book. And my story is. They asked me to tell my story. I haven't done it a lot lately. I used to do it a lot. I was. So I could probably do it by heart, but I still bring some notes just in case I forget, because I tend to go down side roads and I forget where I was at. But I didn't have your normal childhood. My parents were fairly poor. My dad was the oldest of 7 children from a broken home, and he had to drop out of school in the 8th grade and help support him. He died when he was 29 years old from ulcers. I was 4 years old at the time. He died on Christmas Eve, and I remember my dad well. I was 4, almost 5, and I spent some time in the. I had a younger brother. I spent some time in a foster home, and then from there I spent 6 years in a Catholic orphanage run by Polish nuns, Felician sisters. And it was very strict, but very, very holy. Sister Parada was my mother, my father, my teacher. We had school right there in the early years, and we really were. It's like being brought up in a convent. There were 50 boys, about a dozen nuns, and a priest, and we had mass and benediction every day. We heard about God all the time, and from the time I was in the 2nd grade, I wanted to be a priest. And I did go in the seminary in the 10th grade, which I got kicked out of, but that's another story. But I completely forgot about being a priest in the 7th grade when I sat behind this girl, Lois. And something happened to me that it's a funny thing. It's another side trail here. Years later, I owned the Tigers. We just won the World Series. Domino's was household word name by then, and we came from a small school, and they had a reunion, and they were kind of doing everything around me, which is kind of embarrassing. But and this Lois, my first crush, was there. Well, in the 7th grade, I called her up and asked her to go on a date. And she said, just a moment. I waited. She finally came back to the phone, and she said, my mother says I'm too young to go on dates. So that was the end of that. But here we are at this reunion, and I said, you remember Lois when in the 7th grade I called and asked for a date? And she's trying to think, don't you remember it? No, she couldn't hear. I thought she'd been telling everybody all these years that Tom Monaghan once asked her for a date. So that kind of put me in my place. And I got out of the orphanage in 12. My mother was a wonderful woman, but she was basically a male depressant, very bright, valedictorian of her class. But she couldn't handle 2 boys. So I ended up spending my teenage years, other than the 10th grade in the seminary, which basically she got me kicked out of. I worked on foster farms. I loved farm life. and they liked me because even though I ate a lot, I worked hard, and I liked doing chores, and I liked being. If there was any money in the farming, I'd probably been a farmer because I really enjoyed it. And then I got out of high school, no money, on my own, no family to support me, and I wanted to be an architect. But I couldn't afford to stay in school. So I hitchhiked to Chicago to look for a job. I lived in Ann Arbor, which is near Detroit. And I couldn't find anything, so I ended up, I walked by a post office in the suburb of Chicago, and I saw a recruiting sign there, and I thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity, because I heard that if you join the Army, they pay for your college education. So I went and asked the recruiter that, and they said, is that true? If I join the Army, well, if you pay for my education? He said, yeah, if you join for 3 years, so you get 2 years of college all paid for. I said, will that be good at the University of Michigan, where I had been accepted? And they said, oh yeah, no problem. So I went through the whole process and and I had bad years. I didn't have to worry about getting drafted, but I didn't tell them. And it turns out that recruiter was not an Army guy; he was a Marine. He never told me. And so I wound up in the Marine Corps, and I didn't recognize it until just before they had the papers fill out, and they saw a globe and anchor down the corner. And I asked the recruit next to me, is this the Army or is this the Marine Corps? This is the Marine Corps, you dummy. I figured, what's the difference? Signed it, and I found out there's a big difference. Big difference. And I didn't get any college education, but I got a much better education. I had the second highest GCT, that's the equivalent of an IQ, and they put me in the infantry. So I was in the infantry for most of my 3 years. But it's the best thing that ever happened to me. It's the best experience you could have. I saved most of the money I made in the Marine Corps, sent it home for college. And just before I got out of the Marine Corps, I was hitchhiking back to the base, and an Irishman picked me up. He was an oil man, and he told me about this oil deal, and it was too good to be true, and it was. And I had to give him most of the money I made in the Marine Corps, I saved. It all went to him. I got out of the Marine Corps broke. And I was heartbroken, and I realized I'd really been taken for a ride by a fast talker. One of the best things that happened to me in the Marine Corps and in my life, we were aboard ship, and we were stuck out in the Pacific because we had a rudder problem, and we had nothing to do. And I used to daydream a lot of all the things I was going to do when I grew up that I couldn't do now, and all the things I was going to have, and I was pretty good at that. And then all of a sudden I realized, so what? So what if I can have all these things, do all these things? What does it amount to? Is it going to mean anything? And so I started thinking, well, what is important? What will make me happy? And so I said, well, if I lost my health, I'd probably give every penny I got to get it back. So my health has to be more important than my financial health. And I said, yeah, but if I got a body of a Greek god and I got nothing between my ears, I'd probably be better off being a paraplegic with a sound mind. So I said, my mental health is more important than my physical health. I said, that's pretty good, but still, there's got to be something more. He said, yeah, it's relationships. It's relationships with my spouse, with my kids, with everybody that's practicing the golden rule. And I said, wow, that's the key to happiness. And I thought, yeah, but I'm going to die someday. And I'm either going to go to heaven or I'm going to go to hell. And one is fantastic and the other is terrible, and it's forever. And so I said, well, just like that, I had the formula for my life. And it was 5 priorities. Spiritual. I wasn't instinctively holy, but I knew I should be. Social, mental, physical, and financial. And so I decided I'm going to try to get A's on all 5 of those. I got A's at the bottom one. I did pretty well in the health one. I'll be 82 next month, and just till I had a recent situation, I could do 300 push-ups. I don't know many. I never knew anybody in my life that could do 300 push-ups. I did 400 a couple of times. I work out. I'm in shape. I take care of myself. And because I had that roadmap, and I read. I never got back to school. I've got 13 honorary degrees, but that doesn't count. I've probably read a book a day. A week, my entire life. Thousands and thousands of books. I've got probably 3,000 books at home, and I don't read novels unless it's something special. I read things that are going to help me. And I read self-help books, autobiographies, business books, and then in the last years I've been reading mostly spiritual books. And of course, one of the books I read was Ishmael's book. So I never had an inferiority complex about not having a college education. In fact, when I set up Ave Maria, I ran it for 13 years, first in Michigan, then here, and I'm probably the only person in the country that ran a university or college that didn't have a degree, not even an undergrad degree. So I'm still a freshman. So one day, I'm back in Ann Arbor after getting out of the Marine Corps, and I've got 2 or 3 jobs trying to accumulate some money to get into school. And my brother was a mailman, and he used to stop at a pizza place on his route every day for lunch. He got to know the owner. And it turns out that he had another place in Ypsilanti, which is next to Ann Arbor, and it's the home of Eastern Michigan University. And this place was a hole in the wall. I think it opened for a month or two. It didn't have much business, didn't have any business. And so he sold it to somebody, and they lasted a month, and then there it sat closed. And Dominic, the owner, tried to talk my brother into buying it. Well, my brother didn't want to do it on his own. He told me about it, and he said, will you go in with me on this? I says, well, I don't know anything about the pizza business. And he says, well, I've worked in a pizza place before. There's nothing to it. And turns out he did work at a pizza place for 1 month, and all he did was wash dishes. So I said, okay, this is my plan. It's only open at night. I'll work half the night, and by the way, it was $500 down, which we didn't have. And we were able to borrow the down payment and then take over a lot of debt. I said, I work half the night, you'd work half the night, and I have plenty of time to go to school, and of course, we'll sell enough pizzas to pay my way. Well, after we signed the papers, my brother says, I just can't give up the security of my post office job. So I gave up my jobs. I had about 2.5 jobs, and so I had to run it myself. And I was working over 100 hours a week, virtually all my waking hours, losing money, had no idea what I was doing, asking everybody and anybody questions that was in the pizza business or our food suppliers, anybody. One day I told my brother, I'm working 7 nights a week. You got to give me a night off. You own half of this too. And so he worked the night, and he came back in. So I came back in the next night, and he said, I want out. I don't want any part of this. This isn't my kind of thing. It's your kind of thing. And you don't have to give me anything. I said, well, I agree. It's not worth anything. All we got is bills and a lot of debt. And so I said, but you did take a risk, so you ought to get something. And it's definitely not for you. And so I said, we just bought this used Volkswagen. I think we paid $50 to $100 down on it. And I said, you take the Volkswagen, I'll keep making the payments. And that's how I bought out 50% of what became the largest pizza chain in the world. Then later on, I'm getting a knack for it. It became the fair amount of business. I was the first one to really focus on delivery. And it's something nobody wanted except the customer. And they figured nobody can make money on it, particularly in multi-unit. And I got into a few other little places that I bought with no money down. And one day, the place was called Dominic's. And when we bought it, we didn't see an attorney, anything. Dominic gave us permission to use the name, and he had the name registered. And so he called me up one day and said, you can't use my name anymore. I said, but you gave me permission. Changed my mind. I said, why? you can't do that. He said, I'm doing it. Contacted the phone company. They wouldn't take my ad for the Yellow Pages, which was our lifeblood. And so, and what it was, I was doing more business than he was. And I think that probably what bothered him. So we had to come up with a name. I'm talking with my staff about different names. We need to have an Italian name. One name that came up was Monaghan's Italian Pizza, but that got pushed aside. And so someone came back from a pizza delivery at a shoe store, and he runs in the door and he said, I got our new name, Domino's. I said, that's it. It's Italian. It's not a name that anyone else is using in the pizza business, so we can expand with it. And I said, where'd you get it? He said, well, when I walked in the shoe store, the salesman that ordered the pizza said, here's the guy from Domino's. So that's how we got our name. Now, as I said, I was in the seminary. I had a couple of years of Latin, and I don't know if anybody knows what Domino's means in Latin. It means the Lord. So the name of it is the Lord's Pizza. I'd like to say that I thought of that at the time, but I realized that much later. But then we had the Dominick's, and we had two other stores under different names, and I immediately said we'll change all of them, the three stores, to Domino's. We'll use a Domino as a logo. I'll put car top signs on the car, big red Domino. And I was the first one in the pizza business and delivery to put car top signs on. Had a lot of innovations. That was one of the early ones. First one to use corrugated boxes. Now they're the standard of the industry. I should have patented it. First one to use conveyor ovens. Many firsts. And it wasn't so much as being inventive, it's just that in delivery we had to solve a lot of problems so the delivery would work. And so the idea that we put 3 dots on the domino, and every time we add a store, we'd add another dot. Domino's today has 15,000 stores all over the world in over 100 countries. So it was pretty stupid, but that's why we have 3 dots. Some people think it's dice, and then dice 3 dots means that you crapped out, you lost. So, but it's been a very, very up and down ride. And one of the best things that happened to me, my second store was at Central Michigan University in Mount Pleasant. And I was working 7 nights a week. I was training a new pizza maker so I could get a day off and get back to Ypsilanti and look after the other store. And one day it was real slow in the store, and there was one pizza there to deliver to a girls' dorm. And I said I'll take that pizza because it's slow and I just got to get out of the store. And I went there, and in those days, in the girls' dorms, you couldn't deliver to the rooms. You can nowadays. You can do anything in the rooms. They ring the room, and the girls come down and get her pizza. And the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life was working at the switchboard. I could not take my eyes off her. And I was the most bashful guy, despite that 7th grade experience. I was incredibly shy with girls. And I tried to strike up a conversation with her. I got nowhere. And so the girl comes down to get her pizza. I'm going back to the store. I'm all excited. I said, I got to call that girl and see if she'll go out with me. So I got back to the store, and I asked my trainee, I says, you think you're ready to run the store next Monday or slowest night? And because I want to see if this girl will go to the movie with me. And he said, yeah, I'm ready. I knew he wasn't, but I didn't care. So I got on the phone, and I called the switchboard at Sweeney Hall, and I said, I'm the guy that just delivered the pizza, and I wonder if you'd go to the movie with me. And he said, who are you? I'm the guy that just delivered the pizza. I told her what I was wearing. I don't know who you are. And some kind of kook. I said, no, I'm the... So, but it was just 10 minutes ago. And she said, well, I just came on duty. So I said, well, who was on duty before you? She gave me the name of Bonnie Hula. I said, what would you ring Bonnie from? Okay, so she did. Is this Bonnie? went through, got my nerve up again, and said, I'm the guy that delivered the pizza. I wonder if you'd go to the movie with me next month. Who are you? I'm the guy that just delivered the pizza. And I'm going through the whole routine again. And she said, oh, I had this other girl substitute for me. What's her name? Told me her name, and I got her on the phone. I said, you're the one that was working? I said, yes. I wonder if you'd go to the movie with me next Monday. And she said yes. And I was so happy. And went on a date, went to see the Guns in Navarone. It was a small town, only one movie. And then the next date, next Monday, we went to a movie again, and this one was Never on Sunday. So we went to that. Then afterwards, we went to a pizza place. Now that I mind, it was a beer and wine place. And I ordered a beer, and she said, I don't drink. So I just don't like the smell of beer. I said, well, how about a wine? So she ordered wine on the rocks, which I never heard of before. So. And I'm sitting across the table from her. I'm looking at those blue eyes and the beautiful complexion and those cheekbones and the lips, and I just was completely smitten. And a part of it was because she had a little bit of that wine, and she started loosening up, and the smiling of it, and that was it. I think it was a few days later. It happened to be Valentine's Day, and I sent her up a heart-shaped pizza. And then on the third day, I showed up with an engagement ring. And she was kind of taken back. She says, what's this? I said, well, I'm proposing to you. I said, I don't even know you. And she said, well, so I tried to, that broke the ice. I tried to use my Irish blarney, and was getting nowhere. But she said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take the ring, and I'll wear it in bed at night. I won't tell my roommates, and then I'll think about it. So what I tell people in my talks is she said no and took the ring, which is part of it. So every day I took her to lunch because the store was only open at night. And by the end of the week, I got her to cave in and say yes. So we've been married 56 years in August. We got 4 daughters. We have 10 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren, and I'm sure there'll be more on the way. And she's been the most wonderful mother. The kids love her. She's the ultimate grandmother, and now she's a great-grandmother. And one of these women, we first got married, I was living at about $50 a week. She got pregnant right away. We didn't have any insurance. It was, of course, thank God, it was only about $300 for the doctor bill in those days, and it was about $300 for a week in the hospital. But we didn't have the money, but we had to scrape it up. And we lived in a little tiny house trailer, a used house trailer I bought on time. And so after she got pregnant, I bought a bigger house trailer, 10 by 50, and we lived in that for, that's the exterior dimensions. And we lived in that for with two kids for about 4 or 5 years. And then we moved to a house with no basement, no furniture. And so we were, but she in the first 10 years, and business was up and down, I made every mistake in the book. People ask me, what do you attribute your success to? I said stupidity, because I made every mistake in the book. I got into a bad partnership, unbelievably bad. And if you read my first book, it's in there. And then I had a big lawsuit with Domino Sugar over the name. And I thought it was going to put us out of business. We lost. We, thank God, won the appeal. And this all took 20 years. And I'm really going nowhere. I'm getting more stores, but I'm not making any money. But I'm putting together a concept that was unique, both in the way we operated the pizza stores, the central kitchen to get all the back room work out of the store and improve the quality. I hired food technicians, never done before, because all agricultural products vary all over the place. And did blind taste testing to to improve the product for our pizza. I just loved being in business and doing something that no one else could do. Nobody could figure out how to handle delivery. And then in 1980, after this lawsuit with Domino's was won, everything was coming together. I come up with a unique franchise system. We only franchise internally, no outsiders, no initial franchise fee, from 1980 to 1989, I went from 300 to 5,000 stores. In 1985, I opened 954 stores. That was the most units ever opened by a restaurant chain in history. We broke an old KFC record of about 800. We were opening 3 stores a day. It's hard to open 1 store, but to open 3 a day, all over the country and outside the country. This took a lot of planning, logistics, and to do that, as well as training all these people and supervising these stores. I was, by the end of the 80s, I was named a billionaire by Forbes magazine. There weren't a lot of billionaires back then, maybe 20 or 25. So I was here I am, one of the richest men in the country. I'm about 48, 49 years old. Domino's is the 7th largest restaurant chain in the world. We have 54% of all the pizzas delivered in the United States. We're the largest privately held restaurant chain in the world. And so in 1983, I had the opportunity, a dream of a lifetime. I always loved baseball, always a big Tiger fan. The orphanage, I played on the team, mostly Polish kids. The shortstop, I was the only guy without a ski on the end of my name. They just called me Monaghan. And so I was able to buy the Detroit Tigers. And I was able to do it because the guy that owned them, he was 83 years old, but he thought he was going to live forever, and it wasn't for sale. But we got along. We had the same kind of background, and he liked me. And so he said, if I sell the Tigers, I'll sell them to you. I said, well, Mr. Fetzer, if you sell me the Tigers, you name the price, and I'll pay it. Because price wasn't a factor. There's only one Detroit Tigers. And I did that calculate. I knew I was going to pay extra for that because this guy was a real tight German. And so about 6 months later, he calls me out, gives me a price that was far higher than any sports franchise ever sold for. I think the highest was in the mid-20s million, and this was $53 million. At the time, it was confidential because that was part of the agreement. And I paid it. and the first year, we won the World Series. I met 1984. I met Sparky Anderson, our manager, who was a very devout Catholic. I said, Sparky, you know, when I was a kid in the orphanage, I used to play shortstop for the Detroit Tigers. I used to play shortstop for the team, and I always dreamed when I grew up I'd be able to play shortstop for the Detroit Tigers. And Sparky says, I love my mother, but she ain't going to pitch for me. So that was, then the wins the World Series the first year. We started 35-5. That's the fastest start of any team in history, before or since. And it was quite an experience. But with all the success, I started getting a lot of acclaim. I was, they say I was the best known businessman in the country, next to Lee Iacocca, who turned around Chrysler. You know, the Horatio Elder story, and Domino's was growing like crazy and all over the country. And interviews almost every day. And I was, and when I bought the Tigers, I started praying more because I knew my life was going to change. But I also started collecting toys. I had one of the largest car collections in the world. I broke one record after another, buying some of the finest cars in the world. One was $8.1 million for a Bugatti Royale. I was named one of the top 100 art collectors in the country. I had the largest Frank Lloyd Wright collection in the world. I was a lifelong Frank Lloyd Wright buff. I was invited on many major boards around the country. I was given a lot of honorary degrees, as I mentioned. I was a different kind of life from what I was brought up in. And I thought I could handle it because I had my faith and I had my priorities, and that was first and foremost. But I was walking a tightrope. It was sort of, I realized what I really wanted to be was a billionaire saint. and so at one point I decided, Domino's was running like clockwork. Everybody wants to buy it. Everybody wants to take me public. I'm going to do work for the church. And because I was getting into philanthropy quite a bit, and I wanted to do that full time. And so I put the team up for sale, announced it, put one of my vice presidents in charge. I stepped away from the day-to-day operations. I started this organization called Legatus. I had the first Catholic radio station in the country, and now we have a network that we don't own them all, but we provide free programming for about 350 Catholic radio stations around the country. And I built a cathedral in Monaghan where the earthquake was, and the Pope dedicated it. I've funded a startup of an order of nuns, and it's the fastest growing order in the country, the Dominicans, and started some private Catholic schools, and I was doing a lot of these different things, and I realized I can't do everything. I was hit by every Catholic charity out there, and so I decided I had to prioritize. So I decided that after a lot of thought that I should concentrate on education. And now I realize that this isn't my money, it's God's money. And the most important thing I can do with that money the answer is very simple. It's to help people get to heaven. Help as many people as possible get to heaven. That sounds kind of hokey, but it's just nobody has ever been able to refute that. And so that's what I wanted to do, help the church the best way possible. And I determined that education was the best way. Because Catholic higher education is terrible. If you send your kids to a typical Catholic university, I'd say there's about 90% chance that they're going to stop going to church. It's that bad. A lot of research showing that Catholic schools, by and large, from a moral standpoint, a spiritual standpoint, are worse for your spiritual life than going to a non-Catholic school. It's that bad. And so Ave Maria was to be a school that would be a beacon for Catholic higher education, to show that being faithful and sticking with the biblical principles, it'll be successful. There's a market for it, and other people will follow. That's what we're trying to do with Ave Maria. And I was on the board of 6 different colleges, and so I had some experience at that. But things started going in the pot when I stepped back from the company. I stepped back because I wanted to show a buyer the company could get along without me. They got good people and so on. Well, it didn't work out. The company fell apart. And then Pizza Hut got in the delivery business. They actually passed us. They put $1 billion in the delivery. Little Caesars were much smaller than us. They got bigger than us during that short period of time. We had this pizza deal that was very successful. So I had to come back and bail the company out. I brought in, had about $500 million in debt, about 30-some banks all over the world. And I brought in Goldman Sachs, gave them $8 million to sort out all the financing and keep the banks at bay while I could put the company back together for another comeback. So they came in, they looked at spent 2 or 3 months in the company, went through the books and talked to the people, and they meeting with me, and they said, well, this company, there's nobody in this company that has got the ability to turn this company around. you're going to have to bring in a highly seasoned CEO to run this company. And I said, nobody understands this company like I do. I invented pizza delivery. I've been in crisis before. I've always worked myself. I don't know how long it takes, but I can do it. The company's bigger now, it'll take longer, but I believe I can do it. They said, well, we disagree. So I ended up paying them off $5 million, which I really couldn't afford. And then next year, it was a bloodbath. And I came back and took things over, made a lot of changes, closed stores, laid off people. And then in the next year, we had a record profit. And the next year, the debt disappeared. I got rid of all the other, I got in a lot of other companies, and I got rid of all those and sold the Tigers. And they say it was the biggest comeback in the history of the wrestling industry. And it took about two and a half years. And I just worked hard, and all I did was get back to the basics. One day, the guy from Goldman Sachs was in Detroit there, and he came out to see me. And he said, I want to congratulate you. He said, I've been following you. In all my years on Wall Street, I've never seen such a dramatic and complete turnaround as what you did here at Domino's. I said, you remember what you told me? He said, I remember, but I was wrong. So then this time I'm working for God, not myself. I'm building the company back up, and bigger than ever. And then with the idea of this time selling it and starting basically my education program. And that's what I did. I had an interview with the Detroit Free Press after I sold the company. He found out about it. It was top secret. He said I asked to keep it quiet until we make the announcement. I'd give him an exclusive, and I did. And we went through my career and everything. And he said, what are you going to do now? I said, well, I'm going to start at a Catholic university. They really need one. He said, not even you have enough money for that. I said, no, but I got enough to get a good start, and I think when people see what I got, they'll support it. And he said, in fact, it's not my money. I plan on giving everything away. I'll die broke. I don't need anything anymore. And so the headlines of the Detroit Free Press, as big a print as they have, I plan to die broke. And I can't tell you how many hundreds of people contacted me trying to help me accomplish that goal. And that's how we started Ave Maria. Had every kind of problem you can imagine. Came down here, and that's when the hurricanes came, and our estimates for building the campus ended up being double what the official professional estimates were. And it was, and then we built the town, and just when the crash started, and we put $150 million in this town, and we couldn't sell any houses because nobody could get financing, and so finally it all worked out. I was losing between the law school and the town and the university, I was losing about $24 million a year. And if I kept that up, I was going to run out of money. So it was a race between getting the things to break even. And so today, it's I think Ave Maria was the best combination of spirituality and academics of any university in the country. And I think it's on the verge of really taking off. The law school, which is a separate entity, is every year we're named the most conservative law school in the country, which frankly isn't hard to do. And every year we're named the best law school in the country for the devout. And that's not hard to do either. Over 95% of law school faculty are Democrat, and they're probably all pro-choice. There aren't any of those at our law school. And so I stepped down at the helm of the university. I'm on the board. I'm chairman of the law school. And in the last 3 years, it's probably the most improved law school in the country. And that went through a problem because law school enrollments over about 5 years dropped about 40%. So the newer, smaller schools got hurt the worst. But that's turning around now. And we got an outstanding dean at the law school. And now we're going through the beginning of a search for a new president for the university. And it looks like there's some really, really good people out there. So that's what I'm doing. And my day job is I'm running Legatus. It's an organization for Catholic CEOs. We've got about 2,800 members. You have to be a head of a company of a certain size. You have to be a practicing Catholic. You have to be pro-life. Marriage has to be in good stead with the church. And we meet every month. And what it does, you get everybody together of the same faith at a meeting. Magic happens, and you see so many lives changed. And we have speakers and everything, and conventions and pilgrimages around the world, but Holy Land and Rome and everywhere. But the big thing is the monthly meetings, and that's what I do now. It's my day job, and it's growing. We want to have 20 new chapters a year. We got about 90 some now, and so and they say it's the most influential lay organization in the Catholic Church. Some hierarchy have called it actually a lay religious organization, and everybody that works in the organization are devout Catholics. They all go to Mass every day. We all go to prayer every day. We have a chapel right in our building. And so that's what I do. And I'm the happiest guy in the world. I love what I'm doing. I control my life. And so